Welcome to Just a Girl in Construction. This is the podcast for the hard-working construction workers who want to drop the tool belt and build skills to move into a management position. My guest today is Kyle Majchrowski, a conversationalist using human-centric leadership to empower high-performance teams by using relatable stories to drive connection. Regardless of the industry you work in, the common asset is people. As the founder of Ripple Intent, Kyle helps build people, teams, and organizations. In an industry not known for great communication, today we will learn how to use conversation and connection to connect to restructuring the reputation of the construction industry and continue informing the world of all of the amazing opportunities construction has to offer. Good morning, Kyle. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah. So today, I don't always start with the hardest thing first, but I wanted to jump right in and see if we could just kind of build our way from the bottom to the top and maybe talk a little bit about three things that are going to really be able to help the leadership development of those in the construction industry. And so the first I'm hoping we can cover is going to be some of those root causes that start developing a mindset that really inhibits us or doesn't allow us to be able to reach the elevation that we want to in leadership development. And then talking about something that I know is close to your heart, and that is using relatable stories for connection in conversations, and then being able to really practice what it is that we preach. So being able to understand how we're going to implement some of these leadership points into our growth as a leader in the construction industry. So what do you think about root causes for construction?
I think what we've seen, which is really amazing, is over probably the last 15 years or so, a shift from the way construction has historically been delivered to the way it's being delivered now. And I use my son as a really good example. So last summer, he got his first really full-time summer job. High school junior, and they're expanding two schools in our neighborhood, one in the middle school, one at the high school. And he was brought on at the high school expansion as just a general laborer for the general contractor. And myself starting in almost the exact same position many years ago, I was a bit apprehensive going, oh my gosh, what is he walking into? Because the way I started was a little more complicated. Job site dynamics would be a good way to put it. But he was welcomed with open arms and inclusion and just, hey, we're glad you're here. We want to help you be successful in this job throughout the summer. He learned a lot from the superintendent, learned a lot from the project engineers, learned a little bit from the project manager. But it was a shift from the rough and tumble days, I think, that construction has historically been delivered to a more collaborative mindset, which was a great relief as a dad, to tell you the truth. It was nice to see that. But I think as we've been moving towards the way that we're delivering today, especially in the field, now it's not everywhere, of course, but I think one of the root causes is the shift from the way it's always been done, and we can explore that if you want, to the way we're trying to deliver consistency.
And it really is those baby steps, right? I mean, we got to start somewhere. So we have to try, even if we don't try it in perfect formation. But give us a little bit of better background of where you came from in the construction industry and how you've been able to apply what you did know back then to watching what your son was going through.
When I started, it was back in Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago and started working in Chicago after coming out of college, and I was working for a drywall framing and trim carpentry firm, pretty large firm. We ran about 400 people across multiple sites throughout Chicago, did a lot of multifamily and commercial work. And I had a dual role. I helped in the field where needed, and then I also did estimating and some office work. So it was nice to be able to work on both sides of the house, both in and out of the office. And I saw pretty quick what our industry was all about. You could read about all of the leadership on any project by just going to use any porta potty at the time. You would avoid certain people because your day-to-day activities might include being yelled at, berated, talked down to. It was very, very tough guy type approach. It was very CYA, just a very interesting experience that kicked me off to go, you know what, we could do so much better. Not just as an industry, but how we treat people. I mean, I remember one project we had where our guys, it would take over 20 minutes to walk to the porta potties to use the bathroom and then get back to their work. And when you're looking at trying to be as productive as possible, that's a killer. And we started seeing more and more, you park half hour away. You can't eat in the same area that you're working. You need to go somewhere completely else. And all these little things added up very quickly to, this is a really bad industry. We could do so much more. And so all those experiences that impacted the people that I was working with really have stuck with me all these years.
So you did get a unique experience being able to see right off the difference between on-site and in the office. And I'm sure that working in Chicago gave tough guy a whole new definition there in the construction industry. I don't know if what I experienced was probably as brutal as some of the discussion that happened out on the job sites when you were there. But I also remember, being a laborer and just having to go to that blue room and knowing that when you're one of 4 women working with 400 men, it's probably not going to be the most inviting location on a job site. So there are things like that we can change, and that a lot of companies have been doing an absolutely amazing job of changing. But why do you think that there's still a thread of that old school construction that holds on to, that mindset that keeps us pulled down in a sense?
I think it's just some of it's human nature. Some of it is decades, if not a couple hundred years of the Industrial Revolution, where the people at the top know best and they tell the people who are doing the work how to do their job. Even though we've seen countless examples in multiple industries, how that mindset is actually the antithesis of what can actually be produced, there's some safety and comfort in that. And as companies grow, especially construction companies, whether it's trade contractor, a general contractor, or our engineering firms, design professionals, as those firms grow, they learn pretty quick what works, especially if they're growing. They're somewhat profitable, and it reinforces the behavior that got them to be initially successful. So if that happens to be a collaborative mindset, fantastic. If that happens to be, I've figured out how to succeed at low bid, hard bid type of work, then that will continue. And it's usually accidental.
Yeah, that is such an incredible a point to really put some explanation on, because I think that when you find success in something, it starts to develop a perspective or education of its own that is supposed to be reiterating a reward that's going with that. So if you are doing authoritative leadership and you're that superintendent that throws his hard hat and throws a fit on the job that is able to get people moving in the moment, it shows a temporary reward in that sense that for some might continue building something that they think is a successful direction. But in the big picture, we've seen that it usually results in eliminating the collaboration or the desire of other people to want to work under that person.
It's very true. It's very, very true. And as companies get larger, the ability to change, and I say the ability, I think everybody has the ability to change, but the willingness to take a risk, to do something different that is not the way that you've made money in the past, that diminishes over time, especially as you get bigger. It's why so many large organizations struggle is, well, we know how to do it. We've proven how to do it. We've replicated how to do it a million times. And so Why would we do it any different?
Yeah, and profitability really is the key in so many of these businesses, right? I mean, they have to make money to go to the next job for more money. And so that's really what it focuses on. Going back to root causes, some of what I feel has entered into the construction industry is that it really has been an entry level or an opportunity for people who may not have had opportunities in other industries. So maybe people that needed a second chance, or maybe someone who's kind of down and out and needs a quick job to make some really good money, or maybe someone who's been in the industry for a long time and has experienced physical pain for the jobs that they've been working. And so they get hooked onto a narcotic or alcohol. At the end of the day, we used to all sit on the tailgate and talk, and we were living away from home. So it was kind of a nice time to sit there and have a couple beers that then turn into 6 beers on the weekend and then just keep growing that. And so when you have that kind of a reputation attached to the construction industry, and you have some of those people that are intertwined with a bunch of diverse characters, personalities, influences in the construction industry, how do you really start integrating the leadership qualities for everyone to be able to start elevating themselves?
Yeah, the first thing I think is you have to be intentional. We had so many folks in that firm that I got to start with, and so many folks that were elevated to foreman or senior foreman because they were really good at their job. And their job was not necessarily managing or leading people. It was they were good at installing doors. They were good at hanging cabinets. They were good at getting square footage drywall per day and hitting production numbers. And so then all of a sudden we look at them and go, hey, you're good at your job. You should be in charge. And that's kind of it. And I've been on the healthcare side for a long, long time. And I see this with our facilities managers, with our internal trades, when we have folks who are highly technically skilled. Their leadership and management and personal development is often limited to whatever YouTube videos they might be able to find or book that someone recommends at some point during the year.
And this is what you do, right? You through Ripple Intent, you provide training and opportunities for organizations and groups to be able to see how to implement leadership. And so this is where I would really like to encourage our community to be able to like and subscribe and make sure that you're following Kyle and or following me on LinkedIn in order to be able to get a better opportunity for really integrating these leadership tips into your construction practice. And so, Kyle, when you're working with a group of people, sometimes there can be I don't know, I don't want to say it, a rotten apple in the group. And when we talk about one apple that can then spread among everyone, and we hear today that management is one of the number one reasons people are leaving the industry, how do you implement these leadership techniques in order to be able to try to kind of get everyone on the same page?
In order for people to work well with other people, I think you have to start with that fundamental belief that everybody's a good person. Everyone's trying to do their best. Everybody wants to be productive. Everybody wants to contribute in some way, shape, or form. Just because people have found ways to survive or get promoted or do other things in our industry that may not align with all that I just said, doesn't mean that they're inherently bad people. Environments are nasty things that can really push us to do some really bad stuff. And we've seen a lot of organizations that reward certain behaviors and activities and things and promote people that aren't always necessarily leaning towards the collaborative or let's work together, let's be good leaders. And so you get some of that tension that shows up. But where we want to start with, and the reason that we form Ripple Intent, so I saw there were a lot of people in our industry who just wanted it to be better. They didn't want to fight as much. They wanted to get more stuff done. They didn't want to be late. They were tired of change orders, tired of RFIs, tired of doing it twice. That was one of my favorite. We did a project and we're walking through as we're doing the interior, and we're on a stair landing between like the 4th and 5th floor, and there's an electrician up there hanging an exit sign, and it's pointing against a wall. And I asked him, I said, something seems wrong about that. And he goes, oh, I'll tell you, we'll take it back down. And I was like, why are you putting it up in the first place? And he goes, Because I learned a long time ago on this job, it's a lot easier to just do it twice than it is to raise your hand and point out something that might be wrong. And that got my attention. I'm like, geez, the whole do it twice mentality, or 3 times or 4 times, because the folks who are quote unquote leading the project can't get their act together. So the people out in the field, I mean, by the time you install it the right way, you don't care anymore. That's the 3rd or 4th or 5th time. And so what we saw was we could do better. And the way we need to do better is first we got to start and talk about, can we do better and why should we do better as people?
Well, I love the mindset of being able to start with the understanding that everyone is intuitively good. I mean, there is not somebody that's purposely trying to undermine the project, and that it really is a survival that happens on these construction job sites. In Construction Management Online, the curriculum that I've developed for education, we do have a focus of trying to integrate these leadership opportunities in everything that we teach about, not just teaching a leadership class and then moving on to start discussing how to create a submittal. And so being able to really integrate this language of leadership in every single aspect of construction is really important. And I love your reliance on relatable stories. I call it generational storytelling, much like having the elders sit at a campfire and talk to what's been going on in the last 30 years of our life, and being able to pick and choose what it is that really resonates with us personally, so that we can develop a unique fingerprint of our own future. But does this really work for the new generation coming in? I know that they want to know why, but do they want to listen to all of the fill-in information about how great we are and how we built that great big building over there and all of the story that comes with what we have to offer?
I would say our attention span as people has greatly diminished over many, many decades. We really don't. And I look at my own kids. I got three teenagers, and sometimes when they focus, it's rare, but they do focus for long periods of time. Most of the time they don't. I can't even sit through a movie without pulling out the phone and scrolling. And so it's interesting as I work with a variety of young professionals throughout our industry. One thing that I see consistently is a little bit of context is helpful before moving into whatever it may be. One way I see that very well demonstrated is in our RFPs. So when our RFPs get submitted, as we continue to move away from the 40, 50, 60 page documents that talk about how great the firm is, we start moving towards, okay, you were invited because you're great. Now talk about my project as an owner. And when you talk about the owner's project for a few pages, oh, that accelerates the connection right away. It's like, okay, you're not just talking how great you are. You're actually showing us your expertise by talking about my specific project. And that makes enough, it addresses that short attention span, because now we're not reading dozens and dozens of pages of fluff. We're actually talking about the issue at hand with just a little bit of context.
It's not just the context. What I'm hearing is it's the right context, right? Because it really is knowing and understanding that people want to hear about what it is that you're going to do, not everything that is there to support the years of experience that you have in the past. And so even in that moment, saying it correctly and saying it right is almost just as important, because you can shorten the amount of papers that you have or pages that you have, but if it doesn't have the right information, it's not going to pull their attention in.
It also makes a big difference when the superintendent comes and joins the interview team, and no longer are they coached to give a speech or look at the right way or laugh at the right joke. It's you put them in what they're really good at, which is, let's look at the plan, let's look at the site plan, let's look at the project concept. What's going through your mind right now? And they start thinking about access, they think about security, they think about infection prevention, they start talking about flow, they talk about who should be where and sequencing. And when they get into their groove and you give them the opportunity to shine in their groove, suddenly it's the nervousness of being a presenter or having to give a speech is gone, because you're talking to them in their expertise and you're saying, show me what's going through your mind as we talk about whatever it is we're going to talk about. they're then very natural, and the connection suddenly gets established. And you can feel it. You can tell when somebody has that expertise, or they have that eye, they have that mindset, and they've been thinking about it.
And when they've been authentic about it, I mean, I think that it's just human nature for all of us to want to belong and to be fearful of that judgment. And sometimes I think that when we are an on-site person dealing with on-site situations all day long, that when we get in front of the corporate owner, that it does set in a nervousness that makes us question, can I do this? Or is this something? But like you said, if you set it up appropriately and you put them in the skill zone of what it is that they really excel at, then that gives them the opportunity to be able to easily talk about something that they do every day.
Absolutely. We had a young superintendent who we asked a question once during a selection process, tell me about a mistake that you've made. And this young man jumped right in and he said, I set fire to a doctor's office. And of course, the rest of his team, they weren't sure where this was going. So they're very nervous and are looking all around. But this young man decided to go on and he said, look, what happened was I was on a project and the client showed up and I dropped everything to give my attention to the client. Well, all of my guys who needed safety and hot work stuff addressed by me that morning, I pushed. And after a while, they decided to just go to work because I was tied up with the client. Well, unfortunately, we had some hot work that turned into a small fire in an office. And so without missing a beat, he said, what I learned was no matter who shows up on my job, safety is first. The folks who are running the work, they get my attention first. It doesn't matter if the client shows up, the owner shows up, whatever it is, I still have to take care of the people on the site. And I have never missed that ever since. And so it was a wonderful demonstration of not just being authentic and leaning into his mistake, but being able to articulate with heart what he learned and his conviction of applying that going forward.
That is fantastic. I love those kind of stories because they're stories that even if it didn't happen exactly that way, it's something similar that most people have had something on their job site happen where they had to overcome. And so it really opens up that, door of bravery for other people to come out with their stories once they're able to see that someone else has been able to step forward first in that. So fantastic. Well, what kind of a relatable story might you use in one of your leadership events that you create with the organizations that you work with?
I think two of them come to mind that really, really hit home. One was so I had a young man come to me who was early in his career, and we were working through some of this more collaborative approach for a while now. And he came and he said, I see what you're doing and I understand what you're trying to get across. And my struggle right now is that when I look around and I see some of these senior executive vice presidents and the way that they act and they behave in the industry is very different. Some of them yell and scream and they're tough and they push and they have high expectations and all those other things. And they're also making a lot more money than you are. So why should I listen to you? And I thought that's a great question. So I asked him to think about two different perspectives. One was who he is being that kind of leader, who he truly is. Or is that more of a mindset that he's trying to convince himself, if I act that way, then I will be rich? Is that aligned with who he is in his heart? So that was my first challenge. My second challenge to him was he had two little kids, like very little kids. And I said, as those kids get older, do you want them to see you and hear stories about you from others describing the way you just described those leaders to me? So think about those two things. It's very, we have a lot of fathers, we have a lot of sons, we have a lot of brothers, uncles, we have a lot of people, aunts, mothers, you name it, on our job sites who they have families in some way, shape, or form. And the way they behave at work is the same that you can behave at home. I know we don't always believe that. I know some of us believe we have a work face and we have a work persona or we have to be different at work. But that wears on us as people. It takes its toll physically, it takes its toll mentally, it takes its toll spiritually. eventually putting on your mask and being someone you're not day after day after day for a long period of time will take its toll on you. And so finding a place where you not just fit, but that's the other story, is when you start considering, I'm looking for fit and I bounce around. I know someone who has bounced and bounced and bounced and bounced, and every single time it's the same story. I just didn't fit. And what it said was, before you bounce one more time, take a moment. Let's spend some time on really figuring out who you are. That self-awareness, self-reflection, self-understanding, digging into who you are, how you're wired, how you communicate, your beliefs, your values, your ethics. Let's look at all that stuff with some intention before you go try to find the next fit. Let's see if we can stop gambling with where you're working and be more intentional about how you're and where you're going to fit.
That's beautiful, because I will tell you that it's the foundation of what it is that I work off of. And that is just really even being able to strategically and intentionally design your own path. And in that story, you're the common denominator, really, that you need to take that moment to look at what is it that has happened on all of these other jobs that I don't fit in. I've struggled with that myself many, many times on the construction projects that I've been on, and just recognizing that there are some things that I have in my unique development and upbringing that are not going to align well with others. And it hurts to feel like sometimes you have to hide some of those points, but sometimes you have to keep a rein on them until other people are ready to accept them or to be able to understand them the same way that you do. But isn't it sad that our value is measured in money? And I am so grateful for you helping that young man recognize how important his legacy is to the construction industry and where we really should be putting our value when we're creating a life that we're only going to get to live once. And so being able to do that. In Construction Management Online, we do also focus on awareness and self-assessment, being able to have the wherewithal to be able to see what is happening and then be able to assess what direction you need to go or take in order to learn new skills to take you to the next bridge or the next spot. So how do you implement those skills, those training tools that someone needs in order to be able to really use leadership no matter what role they're serving in the construction industry?
One of the best ways is through, so the book that I wrote contains a whole bunch of exercises that are topic-based. And what I have found, especially with adults, is when you give people the opportunity to experience as opposed to tell them how things can feel or how things can go, then you can see stuff actually become practiced. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is we don't have the opportunity to safely practice leadership, management. It's more of don't get it wrong, even though we often say we learn from our mistakes. Just don't make any here because that will actually hurt the company.
No, it's my job and it's my profit. Don't make it here.
Right. So
and what's the title? What's the title of that book?
Powerful Conversations.
Powerful Conversations. I love that.
And so the idea is by focusing on one specific topic, well, it's trust or authenticity, communication, conflict, ego, any of those things, we can usually share an opinion on those topics. We can also share how we view those topics, and then we can also share how we show up in those topics with each other in a somewhat safe environment. And so helps increase your own self-awareness, but also helps you understand where you have opportunities to not just improve yourself, but impact those around you.
Let's figure out a relatable story right now for someone who we want to help implement this leadership technique. And let's say that they're currently working on the job site and they have started as an entry-level position as a laborer. They're kind of thrown around the job site. They may dig a trench here or they may be stripping boards over here. What is it that person could do to implement leadership tools that are going to help elevate their leadership momentum throughout their career?
So I think the first step would be one of the chapters I have in there is about self-awareness and having a conversation. Now I had a story where a young woman was struggling to connect with her boss. Let's just say it's her boss. It was supposed to be a mentor relationship. Same thing with the laborer, my son on the job site. He was supposed to connect with the superintendent. And it was a great thing that my son made some missteps last year. He scheduling, communication, he really struggled with how do you do some of these things. And so I actually challenged him, just like I challenged this young lady, to say, why don't you take some of the questions that are in the book and actually just over lunch the next couple of days, go try to talk. If your superintendent has a moment, just say, hey, can I ask you a couple questions? And you can even say, my dad is challenging me on this. This young lady, I said, don't say your dad. I said, go and say, you know what, I'm really struggling and I need to have some understanding. And so both of them went to these senior folks and said, can we explore a couple questions? Both of them happen to be around the concept of worth. Help me understand how we see our own worth on this particular project in this particular group of people. So my son's was, I'm walking around doing fire watch. I'm listening to music. I'm talking with these guys as we dig a trench. You know, I mean, anybody could do my job. And it was, he said, I'm struggling to see, besides me providing some cleanup and labor, how I provide any value to this job, because it seems like anybody could do the job. And it was a very, if you ask him today, he would tell you that conversation sticks in his head because he learned a perspective about himself as a person that he had no idea that his boss had of him. So of course he came home, he was very proud and very beaming. And I was like, well, don't let it go to your head, but I'm glad that you got that affirmation by simply asking, how do you see my worth? How do you see my value day to day besides just another person who walks in here and cleans up the place?
The perspective from that mentor is so incredibly important and can actually create the window of opportunity available to that person in the future. And so just recognizing that sometimes when we ask, what is our worth, we're doing it with an assumption that we already know and based off of our own perception of ourselves. And when we're able to open that up to someone else for them to, well, gosh, no one around here is as positive as you are, and you actually lift the energy of everyone else as you're walking around on fire watch listening to your music. And so it brings an energy that gets them to love their job. And I love being able to see you engage and interact. And I think sometimes we often only think that experience or knowledge comes from upward down instead of recognizing that there are things that we can learn from our younger generations or our entry-level people in the construction industry as well. And if we're able to really honor both directions of that knowledge, that we can have that collaborative moment to be able to really, continue taking leadership to the next level with these individuals.
And you just touched on something too that reminded me. We spent a lot of time talking about how to display gratitude. During COVID, gratitude was all over the place. Everybody should be gratitude. Say thanks all the time. Thanks for showing up today. Thanks for wearing your PPE. Thanks for getting dressed today. Thanks for taking a shower. It was ridiculous to the point where we just got kind of dumbed down by it. And so now it's, if you can express gratitude on the site with intention, I saw you do something. I saw the impact it had on other people. Do you recognize what you did? I do. Thanks for doing that. So when you do a situation and behavior type gratitude, it goes so much farther besides, oh, thanks for doing that.
And, this is why I was talking earlier of how important it is to make sure that you're integrating leadership in every aspect of construction, because in that moment that you're doing that, you're actually helping them become more aware of how they respond in everything that we do in the construction industry. And so I really appreciate that insight.
The must thing, I think, is we have an industry that's full of people who do not like to beat their own chest and trumpet their own triumphs. And so teaching them how to not only receive but give compliments in a way that's positive and not uncomfortable or weird or awkward it's awesome. It can change the dynamic of any group overnight.
So, I mean, I don't know. I know a couple superintendents that could tell stories forever about how great they are, how they built it by themselves. But I know what you're saying is that, a lot of us feel as though, hey, I had to tough it out. Now they need to learn how to do it. They need to be able to get through this industry. And so, and also in not protection of those, but in their growth, in their own awareness, allowing some forgiveness for some of those superintendents or those project managers who are so focused on the production of the project that they forget to do those nice things or say those nice things. And so this is where we all learn, right, that in that moment that we can really step back and say, what can I do to be a better leader in all aspects of construction? Oh, I can recognize my people who are creating this opportunity for me to be focused on production and the profitability of this project. Because I think that sometimes we're stressed out about the budget, we're stressed out about the schedule, and stopping to think about what someone's feeling isn't necessarily the first thing on our list.
No, not at all. But we all know too that when you focus on the people, the production and the profitability will follow.
This is an incredibly important point. And I don't like talking about politics for sure, because it's enough to be able to get anyone in trouble. But what I do see in what's happening right now is that when you focus on the need instead of focusing on the problem, you tend to find more answers focused in the direction that you're looking. And so if you're focused on the problem, you're going to see and find more things wrong with the problem instead of really being able to focus on how to move that forward. And I think that's why a master plan in everything, a master plan in life, if you can manage your life, you can manage a project. And a master plan in your project, when you create a goal and a vision that is exemplary of where you want to be and designing that perfect construction career, you don't have to know the answers of how to get there. You're able to focus on that, and the energy and the movement kind of starts aligning everything and putting those opportunities in place.
You also learn how to adapt. And I think for a long time, I know I was raised and it was reinforced that on any project, you put a plan together and you go execute that plan. And you watch for risks that will impact that plan in a negative way, and you do what you can. And if those risks materialize, then somebody screwed up. And that's what was taught and reinforced. And it shifted almost overnight when you realize, wait a second, if we put together a group of people and we say, stuff's going to go wrong, let's just admit it, something's going to go wrong. Material's not going to show up on time. Site conditions are going to change. We're going to find something. We're going to have people, labor doesn't show up when it should. All this stuff's going to happen.
It is the only one thing we can be assured of if we're in construction.
Right. So let's talk about before it happens, how we're going to react when it happens.
Yeah.
The first thing is, everyone's going to be upset because guess what? We're people and it's upsetting and our plan fell apart and it's not working and now we have to change. Okay. Let's accept that we're all going to, complain and bitch and moan for a few minutes and be human. All right. That happened. Now we're going to say, hey, remember we said this kind of stuff was going to happen? Yeah. Well, it happened. Yeah. Now what do we do? When that was actually implemented and you saw this change in the day-to-day, it was awesome. It was almost like we're not going to hold you or each other at fault if things don't go well. If things don't go per plan, if things don't go perfect. Instead, we're going to recognize that, oh, your productivity was down last week with your crew. How can we all help?
Literally, if you haven't been following Kyle, you need to make sure that you follow him on LinkedIn, because that right there was a huge gold nugget. Because if we're not able to really see that and be able to act on it, then we're not able to grow. We're not able to grow in that moment. So really do appreciate that. So Kyle, how would you say that there's the difference in leadership between someone who might be early in their construction career, and the leadership that we need to see that's coming from an executive or C-suite position?
I mean, we could talk about some of the obvious things. I think the one thing to reinforce to everybody listening is that it doesn't matter where you are in your leadership journey. You need to lead with both of your ears and both of your eyes. You have to constantly listen. You have to constantly observe. You have to constantly look at what's going on around you all the time. And that should influence how and when you lead.
It's so important. And, going back to what we were talking about with the master plan, I feel like a lot of people procrastinate on this, and they procrastinate on really putting a plan in place because they know it's going to change. So what's the bother in putting together a structure that's going to be able to provide a skeleton of the direction that you're moving? But if you don't know what direction you want to move in, if you don't know the kind of person you want to be, if you don't know the legacy that you want to leave for yourself, then you really just are in a limbo. You don't have any of those planned ideas of being able to move forward and then being able to change or redirect as necessary.
One of the biggest challenges I think we all have is as human beings, we by nature don't like change. We just don't. There's not a lot of people who, if you commute to an office or commute to a job site, once you figure out the fastest, most efficient way, you're probably going to stick to it. And if someone said, why don't you try driving home a different way today, just to see how it goes? Most of us are going to have anxiety about doing that. And it's not naturally something that we want to do. Some of us do, don't get me wrong, but most of us, we resist change.
But even in that story, I mean, the reason why some of us do is because of a different mindset. We want different scenery on the way home, or we want to experience, what that restaurant is that's on a different way home. And so we're able to open up different thinking patterns and different opportunities in that moment. And I think that it's a really important thing to be able to really express, and that is that when you exercise even those things in the smallest form, you're able to start movement in your brain that allows you to be able to be open and pliable to future opportunities of seeing diversity in your life and being able to create and grow in your personal strength.
Exactly right. When being able to first be self-aware of your own reaction to change. So when I say, here's a challenge, go give your phone to somebody you don't know and tell them to delete and rearrange all the apps on your phone.
Oh my God, you just gave me anxiety. I don't know if that's possible.
Knowing our own reaction to that statement, right? Taking a moment and go, okay, first of all, it's not going to happen. So everybody can exhale and just relax. It's okay. You don't actually have to do that. But just going through, okay, what just happened? My heart rate went up, my temperature went up. I could feel. So knowing that that's how we react to change or some type of change, mostly unplanned. It's like, all right, now, like I was saying before, when that delivery doesn't show up or half of the material is wrong, same feelings, same physical, emotional reactions are going to happen. And it's not that we're trying to say those are wrong. What we're trying to say is recognize them in the moment and go, okay, this is me being human. Now what? And that's where the difference goes from just existing to being a leader, is when you choose how the rest of the world around you experiences what you're feeling. There's totally a time and place to go and swear and get excited and get upset and yell and scream because you're venting and go, I'm really upset. And sometimes as a leader, that shows you're human and people feel more endeared to you, but you're being intentional about it. It's not every single time, and you're certainly not stoic, and you're not always keeping that stuff buried and never showing any emotion. You're not being robotic or AI, but you're being intentional about, I'm going to pick and choose how the people around me experience what I'm feeling, because sometimes it can really help and sometimes it can really hurt. And having the wherewithal to know the difference, that's what catapults you into a high-performing team and a really good position of leadership.
And that these things happen in small segments. This is not something that happens overnight. This is something that through intentional practice and through intentional awareness, even in that moment, you don't have to do anything about it. simply being aware of what you're feeling in that moment is going to be a baby step towards how you're going to be able to respond the next time that something like that happens.
Yes, you got to build on it. And it is baby steps, it's practice, it's experience, and it has to stack on top of each other. But that's part of where the conversation comes into play, is you talk about those moments after they happen. No one expects you to be perfect right off the bat, but you also can't learn it all by yourself. You have to go on that journey and share those experiences with certain people around you along the way. That will also help you accelerate your leadership journey, is just openly talk about what you saw, what you experienced, what you felt. Did you do the right thing? Seek the feedback, seek the reflection. All those things help you continue on your leadership journey.
Kyle, in closing, there's going to be some people that are listening to this podcast and they're like, you know what, I'm just going to keep my head down, keep doing my job, just keep working, and not really recognize the importance of what this conversation could do to change not only their career or how they work, but also their life, and being able to implement some of these tools into their life that can really create just a more beautiful existence. Okay. And so we know that in construction, sometimes we use language that turns people off and they completely shut down to it instead of being able to stay open to hearing some of the things that we've talked about today. So what are some of the things that, some of the ways that you've used language in order to be able to help someone just see that little spark of a light bulb that happens that helps them just really recognize how important it is to integrate these tools?
First thing that comes to mind is you're important. Everybody's important in some way, shape, or form. Reaffirming that. I thought you were going to ask, like, what's a good first step to take? Because what came to mind right there is literally there's go take one of those personality assessments, whether it's Clifton Strengths, Enneagram, DISC, Myers-Briggs. I would emphasize the first two, Clifton Strengths or Enneagram. They're easy, they're short, they're minimal cost, but it gives you an almost instant insight into who you are and why you think the way you think, how you feel the way you feel, how you react to certain things. It's somewhat validation, but then it's also insight into, here's probably why you may have some conflict or tension with other people.
And sometimes that third-party perspective is important, because I always forget the quote, but too close to the trees to see the forest kind of thing.
If you take a moment to begin on that self-awareness journey, it will pay off beyond exponential down the road. But you got to take that first step. Who am I? What are my beliefs? What are my experiences? What are my ethics? What are my values? Spend some time to figure out where you are, and then you can start applying it, and you'll see those connections with those around you as you begin that journey.
Fantastic. I am so grateful to have had you on this journey, and for you to tell us about who you are and being able to really be a part of this growth of leadership, of self-awareness in the construction industry. Thank you so much for being here today and dropping some of those gold nuggets with Just a Girl in Construction. Make sure you like and subscribe this YouTube channel if you are interested in keeping up with our podcast. And I, again, would like to thank our guest, Kyle, and turn it over to you to let us know of any links that we might be able to reach out to in order to learn more about your book and your organizational events.
So if you're interested in me, which is usually the last thing, you can find me at kylemajchrowski.com, just like it sounds, spelled the same way. Link, I'm sure, will be somewhere. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. Very active and very active on LinkedIn. And then if you're interested in the book is Powerful Conversations, How to Talk About What Works Most in What Matters Most in Work and Life. You can find that on Amazon. You can also find that on my site. And then if you're interested in Ripple Intent, the organization, we have monthly or every other month events in about 15 cities around the country. They're mostly breakfasts that take place on Thursday or Friday mornings. You can find us at rippleintent.org, and you can see all our events there. Or you can reach me through Ripple Intent as well if you want to have a conversation. I'm always happy to do that.
Well, thank you. And I know that we're here talking to the construction industry, but that you also work with many industries because leadership is important in everything that we do. And so we know that these organizations recognize that people are the key to us being able to be successful. So thank you for what you do in the leadership area. And we certainly appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for what you do, and thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic.